"I'm here for Mommy's job," a 4-year-old told the receptionist. The CEO came down and everything changed. It was a Monday morning like any other inside the glass and steel headquarters of Calderon and Hartley. Employees hurried through the lobby, coffee in hand, tapping their phones, nodding greetings. The marble floors gleamed under soft light from the tall windows, and behind the reception desk, Julie barely noticed as the revolving doors turned once more. Until she saw him. A little boy, no more than 4, stood at the edge of the desk. He wore a white button-down shirt that hung loosely on his small frame and clutched a red backpack tightly in both hands. His brown hair was slightly tousled, his shoes untied. He looked up at her with an earnestness far too serious for someone his size. "I'm here for Mommy's job," he said. Julie blinked. She leaned forward. "Sweetheart, where's your mommy?" "She's home," the boy replied. "She couldn't come today." Julie looked around, confused. "Did she send you?" The boy shook his head. "She's lying in bed. She cried a lot last night." There was something in his tone that caught people's attention. Heads began to turn. A few employees slowed their steps, curious. In a world of noise and deadlines, the stillness surrounding the child felt out of place, like a ripple on the surface of something deeper. The elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed. Nathaniel Carter stepped out. He was the type of man people noticed even if he said nothing. Tall, impeccably dressed, quiet but commanding. Most days, he moved through the building like a shadow, quick, efficient, private. But today, he stopped. The hush in the lobby, the way people stood frozen, something was off. Then he saw the boy. Nathaniel walked over slowly. The crowd parted without a word. When he reached the reception desk, he crouched beside the boy. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Mason," the boy said. "And you're here to do your mommy's job?" Mason nodded. "She's too sad to come." Nathaniel held his gaze a moment longer. There was no fear in the boy's eyes, only quiet determination, the kind that does not yet know defeat but already understands love and loss. Nathaniel stood. "Julie, please book us a small conference room. I'd like to talk to Mason for a moment." Julie nodded, still stunned. A junior assistant came over, and together they led Mason and Nathaniel toward the elevators. The red backpack bounced softly against Mason's back as he walked beside the CEO of one of the largest companies in the city. He held his head high, as if he truly believed he could fix whatever had made his mother cry. And maybe, in that strange, tender moment, he already had. The small conference room was quiet, its frosted glass walls shielding the strange and tender moment happening inside. Nathaniel sat across from the little boy, who had climbed into a leather chair too big for his small frame. Mason's feet dangled in the air, softly swinging. He had placed his red backpack on the table, zipped tight, and sat with his hands folded like he knew this was important. Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Mason, do you mind telling me a little more about why you came here today?" Mason nodded once. "Mommy didn't go to work this morning. She just stayed in bed. Was she not feeling well?" The boy tilted his head, thinking. "Not sick like with a fever, just quiet. She curled up with her back to me, and she was holding a picture of me. She cried." Nathaniel felt something shift in the room. The stillness deepened. Mason's voice grew softer. "She cried a lot last night. She tried to hide it, but I heard her." He looked up with eyes far too knowing for a 4-year-old. "This morning, I asked why she wasn't getting dressed. She said, 'I'm too tired. I can't go to work today.' But her eyes didn't look tired. They looked really sad." Nathaniel said nothing. He simply nodded, his face unreadable but his heart tightening in his chest. "She loves her job," Mason added. "She always came home and said she liked helping people. And when she got paid, we went to the park and bought ice cream. She smiled a lot more then." He glanced down at his backpack. "So I thought, maybe if I come to work for her, she can rest and feel better. Maybe she'll smile again." Nathaniel leaned back slowly, his gaze steady on the boy. He didn't speak right away. Words felt too small for what this child had just revealed. "You're very thoughtful, Mason," he said quietly. "And kind. Your mom is lucky to have you." Mason smiled shyly, kicking his feet. "What's your mommy's full name?" Nathaniel asked. "Elizabeth Parker." The name struck something familiar. Nathaniel stood and walked toward the window, staring out across the city. Elizabeth Parker. He remembered her. A recent temp in the finance department. She had only been with them for a few months. Reliable, efficient, polite. She had worked under Raymond Delgado. He turned back to Mason. "Would it be okay if I asked someone to bring you a snack while I check on something?" "As long as you promise to help Mommy," Mason said simply. Nathaniel's chest tightened again. "I promise." He escorted Mason to the break area, where a young assistant set him up with apple slices and a children's show on a tablet. Nathaniel then returned to his office and immediately pulled up Elizabeth's personnel file. The data showed she had been released just 3 days ago under the pretense of restructuring. Her evaluations had been consistently positive, no disciplinary actions. In fact, she had often worked beyond her hours without complaint. There was no logical reason for her dismissal. Nathaniel opened his email archive and searched for her name along with Raymond Delgado's. A few professional exchanges appeared, and then something flagged under internal review. One subject line stood out: Private Discussion Opportunity Friday. He clicked the message. "Elizabeth, I've been noticing your progress. Let's grab dinner this Friday and talk about your future here. I believe with the right guidance, you could move up fast. Discretion appreciated." There was no reply from Elizabeth. A second email followed 2 days later. "No answer, huh? You might want to rethink that. Opportunities don't wait around forever." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. He picked up his office phone and dialed HR. "Has anyone brought up concerns about Raymond Delgado in the last few months?" The voice on the other end hesitated. "There was an anonymous complaint last week. No name, no details, just that someone felt uncomfortable. We couldn't act on it." "Was it connected to Elizabeth Parker?" "We can't confirm, sir." Nathaniel's tone darkened. "Send me every internal communication involving her, especially from the past 2 weeks. And flag anything from Raymond." He ended the call and stood, pacing. It made sense now. Elizabeth had likely tried to speak up, quietly, carefully, but Raymond, a rising star in the finance team, knew how to cover his tracks, and when she refused him, he pushed her out. But she didn't fight back, not because she was weak, because she was a mother. She needed that job, for Mason, so she stayed silent, carried the weight, and when it broke her, she turned to the one thing she had left: her child. Nathaniel sat back down, the silence roaring in his ears. This wasn't just a personnel issue. This was personal now, and tomorrow he would find Elizabeth Parker. Because something had to change, starting with this. Nathaniel had visited many homes over the years, penthouses with glass walls, elegant brownstones, but none of them made him pause the way this one did. The building was old, paint peeling from its edges. The stairwell creaked beneath his polished shoes as he climbed to the 3rd floor. Apartment 3B, a number written in fading marker, barely clinging to the dented door. He knocked. There was a shuffle inside, then silence. He waited. Finally, the door opened a crack. Elizabeth Parker stood in the narrow gap, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans. Her blonde hair was pulled back loosely, and dark circles clung beneath her eyes. She looked thin, exhausted, but still unmistakably beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or style. It was the kind of beauty that lingered beneath pain. "Miss Parker," Nathaniel said softly. She blinked, her face tightening in alarm. Did something happen to my son?" "No," he said quickly. "He's fine. He's safe. I just wanted to speak with you. About him, about you." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in." The apartment was small, just one room, split into a sleeping area and a kitchenette. A makeshift play corner sat by the window with crayon drawings taped to the wall. There was a folded mattress on the floor, and next to it, a small desk cluttered with papers, receipts, and an empty coffee mug. "Sorry for the mess," she mumbled, brushing a toy truck off the couch so he could sit. Nathaniel glanced around, eyes catching on a framed sketch above the mattress. It was a pencil drawing, soft, detailed. A woman holding a child in her arms, standing just outside the gates of a university. The woman's face looked up at the campus with longing. The child's arms were wrapped around her neck. "You drew this?" he asked. Elizabeth nodded. "You were an art student?" Her lips curved faintly. "I had a scholarship. Illustration. I wanted to create children's books. I used to think maybe I could help kids see themselves in stories." "What happened?" Nathaniel asked gently. Her voice dropped. "I met someone. He was older, said all the right things, told me he'd marry me." Her eyes darkened, but when I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. Nathaniel didn't speak. "My parents were furious," she continued, "said I'd embarrassed the family, told me to fix it. They wanted me to." She broke off, swallowed. "I said no. So they kicked me out. I lost the scholarship, dropped out of school, worked wherever I could." Nathaniel's heart ached. "I cleaned offices at night, waitress during the day. Some weeks I only ate once so Mason could have milk. When I finally got the temp job at your company, it felt like hope." He nodded, quiet. She turned to face him fully now, her voice trembling. But then Raymond started being friendly, too friendly. He asked me to dinner, said he could help me move up if I spent time with him outside of work. I told him no. What happened next? She gave a bitter laugh. My schedule got changed. He removed me from meetings. He started calling me careless in emails, said I missed deadlines. Then one day, HR told me I was being let go due to restructuring, just like that. "You didn't file a complaint?" "I sent an anonymous email, but Raymond's the golden boy, right? No one followed up. I knew if I pushed it would be my word against his. I couldn't afford that. I couldn't lose another job." Her voice cracked. "I knew he wanted me gone, and I let him win, because I needed to buy Mason formula, diapers. I needed to keep our heat on." Nathaniel stood and walked to the window, staring out at the rusted fire escape. He ran a hand through his hair. She spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't cry in front of Mason until yesterday. I thought I was doing okay, but he saw through me, and today he walked into your building." Nathaniel turned back to her, eyes shining. "He said he wanted to do your job for you, so you could rest, so you could smile again." She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. He crossed the room slowly, and this time he did not come as her boss, just a man who had seen strength in the purest, rawest form. "I promise you," he said, voice steady, "this will not end here." It took less than a week. Nathaniel worked quietly but thoroughly. Emails were pulled, security footage reviewed, old complaints re-examined. Each piece added weight to what he already knew in his gut. Elizabeth had not just been dismissed, she had been pushed. Raymond was summoned to a private meeting in the executive suite. He entered with his usual confident swagger, smirking as he dropped into a chair across from Nathaniel. "This about the girl?" Raymond asked, his tone dismissive. Nathaniel did not answer. He placed a stack of printed emails on the table between them. "These were sent from your account." Raymond scanned the pages, his smirk deepening. "She never replied. Doesn't mean anything. She wasn't fired. She left." Nathaniel leaned forward, eyes cold. "You're saying she left voluntarily?" "That's right," Raymond shrugged. "She couldn't handle the pressure. Single moms like that, too much drama." Nathaniel tapped one email near the top of the stack. "This one says, you might want to rethink that. Opportunities don't wait around forever." "Is that what you call encouragement?" Raymond scoffed. "You're reading too much into it." Nathaniel's voice dropped, sharp and precise. "And this one?" He pulled out another page. "Let's grab dinner Friday and talk about your future here. Discretion appreciated." "That is not mentorship, Raymond. That's manipulation. And it's a violation of every standard we claim to uphold." Raymond's face finally shifted, just slightly. Nathaniel stood. "You're being suspended effective immediately. Legal and HR will follow up. You're not to return to the building without clearance." Raymond's smile faded as security arrived outside the door. By the end of the day, he was officially terminated. The next morning, Elizabeth opened her mailbox and found an envelope with the company's crest embossed in gold. Inside was a formal invitation to return, this time not as a temp, but on a trial track toward permanent hire. Attached was a handwritten note. "Elizabeth, I cannot erase the hurt you've endured, but I will not let it happen again. Nathaniel." Along with the letter was a small package for Mason. Inside was a new red backpack and a handmade booklet titled Mommy's Office. Each page was drawn in crayon, simple sketches showing Elizabeth at a desk, smiling, typing, talking to coworkers. It was clear someone had taken the time to ask Mason what he imagined his mom's job was, and then helped him turn it into something tangible. When Elizabeth walked through the glass doors of Calderon and Hartley 2 days later, she was not the same woman who had left. She stood taller. There was still pain in her eyes, but there was also pride, and when she stepped off the elevator onto her new floor, something unexpected happened. People applauded. Not loudly, not in spectacle, just a warm, spontaneous gesture. A few clapped softly, some smiled. A woman from HR came forward and offered a hug. Elizabeth nodded, barely able to keep her composure. She was home again, but this time on her own terms. Nathaniel kept his distance that day, watching from the far end of the hall as Elizabeth was shown to her new workspace. She was now part of the strategy operations team, a meaningful promotion, earned not out of pity, but in recognition of her resilience. And yet, he knew that a single act of justice would not fix a broken system. Which was why, 1 week later, he stood before the entire company in the main auditorium. The room was packed, every department represented. Elizabeth stood in the back, Mason beside her, holding her hand. Nathaniel stepped to the podium and took a deep breath. "Many of you have heard bits and pieces of a story involving one of our former employees, now a valued team member once again." He paused, scanning the room. "What you may not know is that this company failed her. We allowed power to go unchecked. We turned away from discomfort, and we nearly lost someone extraordinary." He looked directly at Elizabeth. "I met her son before I ever met her. A boy who walked into this building, placed his backpack on our front desk and said, 'I'm here for Mommy's job.'" A soft murmur swept through the crowd. That one sentence reminded me what we stand for, what we should stand for. From this day forward, we will not just react to complaints. We will protect our people before they have to ask. We will listen. We will investigate. And we will believe. He gestured toward the corner where Mason now beamed up at his mother. This new policy is inspired by 2 people, one who found the strength to speak up even when the world told her not to, and one who was brave enough to wear his mom's shoes just so she could rest. Silence. Then applause. Real applause, not polite, not procedural. Elizabeth wiped her eyes. Mason squeezed her hand, and just like that, the air changed. She was no longer just surviving, she was rising. Elizabeth did not return to her job simply to reclaim what was lost. She came back with purpose. Within weeks of resettling into her new role, she approached HR and then Nathaniel's office with an idea. Not a complaint, not a plea, but a proposal. A full outline, typed, annotated, and backed with research. She called it Women and the Right to Speak. The concept was simple, a series of internal workshops designed to empower female employees to recognize, report, and navigate inappropriate workplace behavior. But it was more than that. Elizabeth envisioned a space where women could speak without fear, share without shame, and receive advice directly from legal and psychological experts. Completely confidential, entirely free. When the proposal reached Nathaniel's desk, he read it twice. He said nothing to her at first. He simply forwarded it to HR with the note, "Approve, full support, budget as needed." The first workshop took place in one of the company's largest meeting rooms. Over 40 women showed up. Some came with questions, some came with quiet pain, some simply listened. And Elizabeth, though not the speaker, sat in the front row for every single session, her presence a silent promise that no one there was alone. Word spread, attendance grew, other departments requested to join, the legal team volunteered pro bono hours. One of the city's leading therapists offered her time after reading about the initiative online. Through it all, Elizabeth remained calm, focused, and steady. She never made it about herself. She never took the spotlight. But Nathaniel saw. He watched from afar, not to interfere, but to understand. He saw how her co-workers gravitated to her, how junior staff felt safe around her, how even department heads sought her opinion, not because of her title, but because of the quiet authority she now carried. She had transformed, not into someone new, but into someone she had always been, now finally allowed to be seen. Then one day, Nathaniel overheard a conversation in the break room. Elizabeth was gently declining an offer to lead a new project. "I'd love to," she said, smiling. "But I've used up too many of my paid days recently. I can't afford to lose another day if Mason gets sick again." She said it casually, with no bitterness, but it stayed with him. That night he reviewed company policy. The rules were clear: limited paid time off, especially for employees still under trial contracts. But it was outdated, especially for working parents, especially for people like Elizabeth. "Did it," she said. "How do you do, Ben?" "It's been 10 years." He stayed late, rewriting internal guidelines with the legal team. By morning, a new draft policy was ready. It allowed expanded sick leave for single parents, protected their income during medical absences, and ensured fair review for advancement regardless of time taken off for childcare. He submitted it for implementation, but when the final memo was sent company-wide, the name in the Policy Proposed By section read Elizabeth Parker. She discovered it a day later. She said nothing at first, but the following morning a handwritten envelope was delivered to Nathaniel's office. Inside was a note, written in clean, careful script. "Thank you for not fixing things for me. Thank you for letting me fix them myself. It's not because you did it for me. It's because you let me do it." Elizabeth Nathaniel folded the letter slowly, setting it on his desk. No signature needed. He already knew the name by heart. They never called it anything. There were no declarations, no late-night confessions, no sudden, sweeping gestures. But something between them began to shift, quietly, gently, like two melodies slowly finding harmony. It started with brief conversations in the elevator, not about work, not always about Mason. Sometimes it was about books, or how Elizabeth missed painting, or how Nathaniel used to run track in college. She would smile at his stories and he would ask about her son like he genuinely wanted to know, not out of politeness. Then came the lunches. At first it was coincidence, both of them stepping into the break room at the same time, reaching for coffee at the same moment. Then one day, she brought an extra sandwich and casually left it on the seat beside him with a shrug. "I made too much," she said. "Better than cafeteria tuna." He accepted without a word, but his smile said more than "thank you." Their connection grew, not in grand moments, but in the way they looked for each other across meeting rooms. How he waited for her before leaving an event, how she asked him, once, gently, if he was eating enough. And through it all, there was Mason. The little boy had taken to calling him Uncle Nate without prompting. Nathaniel never corrected him. Instead, he leaned into the role with quiet warmth, sending small puzzles to Elizabeth's apartment, asking about Mason's favorite cartoons, even showing up once with a gently used art set for someone with a creative mind. Mason responded the only way a 4-year-old could, by drawing pictures. He brought them to the office when Elizabeth stayed late, simple crayon sketches of 3 people, a tall man, a blonde woman, and a little boy holding both their hands. "Us at the park," Mason explained proudly one day. "We're a team." Nathaniel kept one of those drawings pinned inside a drawer in his desk. He never showed it to anyone, but he looked at it often. One afternoon, while reviewing quarterly budgets, Nathaniel's assistant mentioned in passing that a local preschool had flagged a partial tuition concern for one Mason Parker. Nothing urgent, just a note from the billing office. Nathaniel made one call, then he sent a letter to the school with a personal check enclosed. The note read, "Please apply this amount toward Mason Parker's tuition. Official records should state, paid by Elizabeth Parker. She is the provider. She is the example. No one told Elizabeth." But 2 weeks later, she arrived at the preschool and noticed the billing statement had changed. She asked the front office why. The receptionist just smiled and said, "A friend of the family took care of it." That night, she looked at Mason's newest drawing, a scene at a picnic, the three of them laughing under a tree, and something inside her settled, not with certainty, but with peace. Neither she nor Nathaniel tried to name what was growing between them. It was too new, too sacred. But each day they walked a little closer, and though their steps were quiet, their hearts were moving in the same direction. Elizabeth had always known how to stretch a dollar. She could make dinner out of leftovers, sew patches into Mason's jeans to buy another month, and turn old shoeboxes into race car tracks. But this time, it hurt more than usual, because it was Mason's birthday. She had saved what she could. Enough for a small chocolate cake from the corner bakery and 2 helium balloons she tied to the back of a chair in their tiny kitchen. No party hats. No friends. Just her and Mason, seated on the worn floor beside the flickering candle. "Make a wish," she whispered, trying to smile. Mason closed his eyes, scrunched up his nose, and blew. Then he turned to her and wrapped his arms around her neck. "Mommy," he said, his voice full of joy, "a birthday with you is the best birthday in the world." Her eyes stung. She held him tighter, whispered, "You're the best gift I've ever had." They ate cake with plastic forks and told each other silly stories. Mason laughed with his whole chest. Elizabeth tucked the memory away like treasure. The next day was a Saturday. Elizabeth took Mason to the park near their apartment for a little walk and sunshine, but as they approached the open field, she froze. There were picnic blankets everywhere, colorful ones, checkered ones, some with umbrellas and coolers. A small speaker played cheerful music. Tables were set up with juice boxes, snacks, and art supplies. Children ran across the grass, giggling, chasing bubbles. She blinked, overwhelmed, unsure if they'd stumbled into a public event. Then she saw him. Nathaniel stood near the edge of the gathering, wearing a navy polo and casual pants, holding a stack of paper plates. When he spotted them, he smiled. Elizabeth approached slowly. "What is all this?" He shrugged. "Casual. Company family picnic. Decided it was time we hosted something a little more human." "You never mentioned it." "Spur of the moment idea," he said, then leaned down to Mason. "I heard someone had a birthday." Mason beamed. "I'm 5. Well, that calls for celebration." Nathaniel reached into a nearby cooler and handed him a wrapped gift, colorful, hand-labeled, "To Mason, the bravest little man I know." Mason tore into it eagerly. Inside was a set of washable paints, sketchbooks, and a T-shirt with the words "Future CEO" printed across the chest. He squealed with delight, then held the shirt up. "Mommy, look! I can be like Uncle Nate." Nathaniel gave a small laugh, then turned to Elizabeth, more softly. "We kept it small. No press, no announcements. Just a few employees with kids and a few people who needed a reason to smile." She swallowed past the lump in her throat. "You did this for him?" "For him. For you. For everyone who needs a day that feels like joy." As the afternoon unfolded, children painted, danced, and played games. Parents sat on blankets, trading stories and snacks. Mason ran through the grass, his new shirt already stained with paint, laughing with other kids like he had known them forever. At one point, Nathaniel stepped up to the portable microphone and tapped it gently. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "This picnic wasn't in the calendar or budget. It came together because someone reminded me that sometimes The smallest people carry the biggest truths. He glanced at Mason, who was now sitting on the grass, making paper crowns with 2 other kids. "This is our first Mason Parker Day," he continued, "and I hope it won't be the last." The crowd clapped, warm and real. Elizabeth watched from her seat under a tree, her arms wrapped around her knees, eyes never leaving her son. He looked so free, so happy. She glanced over at Nathaniel, who met her gaze from across the lawn. He said nothing. He did not need to. Everything she needed to feel was already there, in the breeze, in Mason's laughter, in the space he had made for them without ever asking for anything in return. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself simply feel happy. A year had passed. The air in the auditorium was warm with quiet anticipation as colleagues, friends, and families filled the rows. At the front, a screen glowed with a single phrase, "Honoring those who change us." When Elizabeth's name was called, the room stood in applause. She stepped onto the stage in a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, and her voice trembled as she faced the microphone. "I used to think staying silent was how I protected my son," she began, "that keeping my head down, working hard, and saying nothing was the best I could do." She paused, scanning the faces before her. "But it turns out it was a 4-year-old boy who saved me by refusing to stay quiet." The room stilled. Elizabeth smiled softly. "He walked into this company, said he was here to do my job, and in doing so, he reminded us all what courage really looks like." She stepped down to another standing ovation, her heart full, her hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from something closer to peace. Mason, now 5, sat in the front row, swinging his legs and clapping enthusiastically. At school that week, he had turned in a paper titled, "My Hero, the Man Who Helped My Mom Smile Again." He had drawn a picture at the bottom, 3 people holding hands under a tree. His teacher called Elizabeth and cried while reading it. That Saturday afternoon at the very park where so much had begun, Elizabeth sat on a bench under golden leaves, watching Mason climb the playground's ladder, his laughter rising like music. Nathaniel approached quietly. She turned, smiling, before she even saw him. He did not say much. He sat beside her, eyes on Mason. After a moment, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. He did not kneel. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "I'm not giving you this so you'll feel like you've been chosen," he said, voice low, steady. "I'm giving it to you because I already feel like I've been found." She looked at him, her eyes brimming. "I don't want to ask you to marry me just to make things official," he continued. "I want Mason to be able to call me Dad." He paused. "And I want to be able to call you home." Her tears came silently, gently. She nodded without a word, pressing her forehead to his shoulder. From the monkey bars, Mason spotted them. He ran, arms wide, voice full of joy. "I have a dad now?" Nathaniel stood and swept him into his arms. "If your mom says yes," he teased. Elizabeth laughed through her tears. He already did. The wedding was quiet, held in the garden behind the company building, surrounded by wildflowers and co-workers who had become friends. There were no chandeliers, no designer gowns, just daisies in mason jars, laughter, and love. Later that autumn, on a walk through the same golden park, Mason skipped between them, holding both their hands, pointing at leaves, asking questions only a child could dream up. And as they strolled beneath the trees, Elizabeth leaned into Nathaniel's side and whispered, "We weren't born a family." He squeezed her hand gently. "But we chose to become one." If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the quiet strength in a mother's love, or the unexpected bravery of a child's heart, we invite you to stay a little longer in our world. At Soul Stirring Stories, we believe in the power of simple moments, in love that heals, and in families born or chosen that make us whole. Subscribe to our channel for more real, heartfelt stories that remind us of what truly matters, because sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truths. And sometimes one story is enough to change everything. Thank you for watching.